So I invite at this time our wonderful pastoral staff to come up because, as I stated prior, today we get to recap, we get to review and think on all of the wonderful things that we've experienced this year. So come on up, shy Pastor Matt. Join us up here and let's get together with these guys and learn about what we've done, what we can do, and some of the amazing things that have happened.
All right. Thank you so much, Carrie. Appreciate that. And it's an awesome time of the year because not only do we celebrate the coming of Jesus Christ, but we get to celebrate what he allows us to do here at Elevating Life Church as we spread the message that he came to bring to this earth of salvation and love in him. And I want to introduce who we have here on stage. I'm going to start at the far end with the beauty to these beasts. We have our financial elder, Lynette Gimble, down here. We have our senior pastor, Drake Hunter, with the interesting jacket on. We have our financial and executive pastor, and I mean, he does a little bit of everything, Matt Wolf here with us this morning as well. And what we'd like to do is kind of take a look back over 2022, because one of the things that we need to make sure we do is remember and see what God has been doing, how he's been working, not only in our lives individually, but in our church as a ministry. Are we walking in the steps that he has laid out for us? And so we do this on an annual basis. We look back over the year and celebrate those things that were great, and then talk also candidly about those things where maybe we missed the mark a little bit. And so our message series in 2022 was the epic story of God, and that is the Bible, from Genesis all the way through Revelation. And Drake, I want to bring you into the conversation right here and talk about that as you were determining what the message series would be for 2022, your thoughts behind that.
Yes, you're going back, my goodness, 13, 14 months ago, maybe even further than that. As you well know, here at Elevating Life Church, we do things intentionally. But going back, I recall kind of the moment where we were after COVID-19, and actually we're just coming out of it. We're now in the post sort of kind of COVID-19. But I was like, we got to do something fun in the sense of who we are today. But more importantly, we really have to learn how to understand our Bibles. Now, there's so much to that. We have to understand our Bibles and understand that this reality that we're living out now as Christians and as a local church is all about a story, not our story. And I think oftentimes we get lost in our selfishness. It's more about me, our values, me, myself, and I. Or we can even go to, it's me, myself, my family, and we completely forget about God, and it is his epic story. And, you know, sitting back, I was up in Dillon. As you know, I do my offsite for 10 days, dreaming and visualizing and putting things on paper in the sense of how we can actualize this whole vision to make it a reality. So we are sitting where we're at today so that we are just more better together with God, each other, but also making sure that we understand our role in loving ourselves, our neighbors as ourselves, And so coming together, came up with this theme. Of course, if you know our good friend, Pastor Kim, Dr. Kim, I don't know his last name. He's so personal, I don't know his last name. He is a good friend. And he came up and then worked with us in a workshop, and he's the one that has more better bikes. And I said, oh, that's just perfect to bring the understanding of the Bible and our church and us together. And so we came up with that theme, more better together. And so we started the year way back when. It seems like yesterday, but then again, it seems so far away. We started with understanding the Bible. Now, let me share this. Most Christians read their Bible somewhat, somewhere, sometime. It might be Christmas, Easter, and one other time. It could be every day. But the challenge is, as a Christian, the command isn't to have a relationship with your Bible or a book. The command and the teaching and our reality is we have a relationship with the true God. And so this whole year, this is exactly what it was meant to do, is to bring awareness of, yes, understanding our Bible, but in a way that's going to be grand. God's love sits with him around all of this. He is the supreme creator, the supreme being that created all nature, that allows all history to move forward in his goodness and in design. And so if we can understand the bigger picture, then we can live in God's love with that attitude and then come back to where we're at with the understanding of our role and responsibility in this relationship with God, with other people. And then we just take one step at a time and truly do it together through, again, a fun way. That's why we use the comic book characters. But notice this, about halfway through the year, we did intentionally say, we're just putting the characters aside that are fictional comic books, because what happened is too many people were coming up to me and were more concerned about the character of the comic book than they were about the actual character and or gist of the lesson. That kind of shares with us where we're at, so we made an adjustment so that we can be intentional, we can be caring to God's love and responsible and respectful, and of course, hoping that we deliver God's wisdom with integrity. And so we made that change, and here we are. And again, we started with the lesson, the message, the epic story of God. And then last week, we wrapped up this whole experience by looking at the book of Revelation, and I hope this was a true revelation, and you now have a new apocalypse of what goodness is. Because last week's message brought this all together, that we are not concerned about end times. We don't live in problems. We live in the purpose of God. And when we have that perspective, the end times is the end times of all that junk and garbage and problems. And we decide this moment that for the rest of our life, we're going to live in the purpose of God. And the news isn't going to scare us. The government's not going to scare us. Education is not going to scare us. What we're going to do is allow God's love to be revealed not only to you individually, but to us. And then we become a powerhouse for God, and we become one, and we become the superhero through Jesus, where then, as I shared last week, we get to experience the true apocalypse of God, which is a new beginning and a new life that truly is more bedded together, but more importantly, we're reaching our potential together in God, and we're truly, truly living out what we believe. We're doing it. We're actualizing it. So the visualization, first message, the closing, actually doing this now, coming together, and let's move forward as a church. And let's make sure our priorities, our values, and John, you might talk a little bit towards that, are in line with what we're doing. And as the captain of this particular ship, I'm an under shepherd, but I am a captain of this boat, this ship that God has given me during this time. Follow that direction, align with us, and let's move in the step of the Holy Spirit, with Jesus Christ being the admiral of all of this, so that then we can do it not in spite of everything or in our differences, but we're doing it together because we see, not only do we see more of the promised land, we're living in it. Does that make sense? And so there's my opening statement, a couple of minutes, but with that, John, there you go.
Thank you, Drake. We'll be coming back to you, so don't get too comfortable. Over this past year, we've learned a lot. We've learned a lot about not only the entire story that God has put in place for us. We tend to take the Bible and we find things that will support what we already think, and we take it out of context. And what our purpose was this year was to make it so that we see what God's perspective is, not our own perspective, and try to make it fit what we already believe, but rather to change our perspective to fit God's perspective by learning the entire Bible. Now, obviously, we didn't go verse by verse through the Bible, but we went pretty much book by book for the most part, or at least section by section, to pull out some important things that we need to put in place in our lives. And what I'd like to do is, this needs to be interactive, so especially for those of you that have been with us through the year, if any of you have any questions, or maybe there was a particular, not necessarily a message, but a thought that came out through the year that made a difference in your life, or maybe you do have a question about the particular message series and such, raise your hand if you would, and Harvey has a microphone, and we'd like to hear those. So anybody have a question?
Hey, John.
Yes.
As you're thinking of that, is anybody curious what this word is back here?
Denouement.
Raise your hand. Yeah, the denouement. It's a French word. It's just a fancy word. We thought we'd impress you today. But if you know storytelling, this is known as the wrap-up. If you have ever written a story, and this is God's epic story. So today, that's what this is about, where you untie some things just to have a conversation, but then you come back and tie it up, and we come to closure. So this just means closure, and that's what denouement, how you pronounce it. That's why you see that up there. So I just wanted to.
I asked Matt if he knew what that word meant. He said, yeah, of course, because he's the classy one amongst us.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, before we go any further, are there any questions or thoughts that anybody would like to share at this point? All right. So go ahead and turn Carrie's mic on.
Chad.
Whoa.
No, sorry.
Am I on? Just to, I guess, go back to like the reflection time for all of you. Is there one thing that we talked about this year in the messages based on how you guys see our community right now? What do you think we've done or talked about or preached this year that has been most meaningful to the status of our community today?
So when you say community, you mean?
Like Morgan County,
Okay.
like us, our surrounding,
Or the
yeah.
church? Okay.
our Morgan County.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, what came to mind right there, if you recall the message with the book of Jonah. The book of Jonah is a misunderstood book, and one of the reasons I delivered that particular message is to show the whole gist of the book of Jonah is to show you that everything is upside down in the day of evil. Sorry to bust anybody's bubbles, but Jonah is a false prophet. And I know we see him as a cute little guy in this little whale, but if you really read those 4 chapters in the book of Jonah, you see where everything is upside down, especially in, let's say, the religious sense and or faith. The book of Revelation comes to mind. The book of Revelation is for the comfort and the love and for God's people to see that there is a revelation out there for you for God. But you talk to most Christians, the way they've been taught through that experience and through the false teachings of the book of Revelation, and I have no problem saying that, they see it as the end time. They're just a victim in the sense of where they're living, and they're just waiting for Jesus to come and rescue everybody and be done. No, the revelation of God is, you know what? Let's change our perspective, which Jonah did not. And so, and then also the character that needs to go with that so that we can move forward in this reality of our fall in now the time we live in, which is the time of Jesus, which is the day of rest in Scripture, where we come together and truly are living in the promised land that Jesus established. That particular book, again, Jonah, shows us everything is upside down. You look at your average Christian, look at your own belief system perhaps, and or what that experience is, and what happens is we're fearful of everything that's going to happen, and we lose focus. Rather than being in church, we listen to the news. Rather than truly getting around right people to develop proper godly character, we're around everything but. Even though we call ourselves a Christian. And I know this is radical, but so is the book of Jonah. And so our perspective, our character, and then our performance kind of looks like that. And then we come to church on Sunday, and we know the stats. The stats that people go to a Christian church here in Morgan County is like 69%. It's dropping. And there's a reason for that. But the challenge is we've got to change our perspective to God's love, not to the perspective of everything's bad. We've got to change our character, not to the culture or the society's character, but to Jesus' character. And then, of course, our performance, as we do here with our live nativity scene, what we do with our fall festival outwardly to our community is to be the image of God or the reflection of that goodness, where then people are drawn to it, going, you guys have something that the other, let's say, religious institutions and or other Christians don't have. First of all, you have love for one another, forgiveness, and you guys honor one another. You are faithful in the sense to God and how He made you, and more better together. Another thing I can throw out there is that we have integrity. Yes, we're figuring it out, but with proper leadership and adjustments and corrections and even sometimes reprimand, we get us back to that. So that would be the biggest for me. I remember preaching that, hoping that expectation is we've got to open people's eyes. We don't have a good perspective overall, and we've got to turn that around so that then we're living in the true day of rest, the seventh day of rest. That's where we're living today. Unfortunately, we continue to live upside down in that, and then we see ourselves as Jonah. And if you know Jonah's story, he sat down in all of his emotions, and he just kind of self-pity at the very end of the book, and the vine withered, if you know the story, and nothing else happened. Gone. It's a sad story. Is it a sad story here? Yes, but always, always with hope. Why? Because we have the light of Jesus, even in a moment like this. Does that answer that question?
Before we go on to another question, I want to ask our executive pastor, Matt Wolf, to give some thoughts on that same question. Matt comes from a little different perspective as far as working in the community and with the community. And so, Matt, if you would give some thoughts on that.
Absolutely. So it's very interesting when you look through the lens of what is God doing. We get hung up too often that karma and chance and all these things that we like to put into our perspective of what's going on. But this is a God movement. I remember a time I had an interaction with a guy, and he was like, "Wow, this is really weird. Do you think this is a God thing?" And I laughed at him. I said, "What? I said, isn't everything a God thing?" He kind of looked at me. He's like, "Well, that's a good point." It's like everything is a God thing, right? And so when you look at the perspective of how our community is growing and moving right now, there's a lot of movement, not only in our community, but in our world. I like to envision it like a river, right? So our path along with God is like a river. There's only one outcome when you're in the river. You're going to end up at the end of the river, correct? And so when we get ahead of times where the white waters come and we go cling to the side because we're afraid to go through the white water, you can cling there as long as you want, but eventually you're going to let loose and go through the white water, right? And once you get through the white water and you bounce off the rocks and all that stuff, you come through stronger, not weaker. Even if you're beat up, you're stronger because you realize, I can go through the white water and survive. God's journey is the same way. And so when we look at that and we stick together, we can go through some rough times. We can go over some waterfalls, all these things that are scary. But when you get to the backside of it, it's, wow, that wasn't so bad, right?
Kind of fun.
It's kind of fun. I survived it. But what we do is we gain strength as we go through these tough times. And that's what our community just went through. Our community just went through some white water. The pandemic was a real thing, right? that shaped and redirected our culture. If you look at the grand scheme of it, we redirected the entire world culture in 1 year. That's not something in the capacity of man, that's the capacity of God. When God wants us to move, we're going to move. When you go through the whitewater, you have a little bit of control, but God's going to control the outcome. A lot of reflection from my own journey on stop trying to control God's outcomes, right? How many times do we try so hard to control the outcome and it doesn't come out the way that we tried? What we can control is the work. When we control the work and leave the glory to God, that's when true magic and true fulfillment starts to happen. When we let loose of the conclusion and understand that we're just part of the story, our lives become a lot simpler, a lot more fulfilling, and we get closer to God because we learn to appreciate His glory and His way and His rewards much more because we've relinquished the stress of the outcome. So that's my perspective of our community right now. I interact with the community every day. I run a service company here in town, and so I interact with the community constantly. And I get to go into people's homes and interact with them and see, through their struggles and their times, how they're interacting, and an opportunity for me to do God's work through my work. It's another testimony that I put out there is we keep our lives so compartmentalized between our faith and our jobs and our family. I go back to where I had the conversation, is this a God thing? Absolutely, it's all a God thing. God has us there where He needs us. It's amazing the way places where God provides me opportunities to help people through my craft. And so take God to work with you. Take God home with you. Take God. Wait a second. Go with God, right?
Hey,
That was
Heather,
intentional.
can you cue up 4:7, Proverbs 4:7?
Sometimes when we're in that river, we're pretty sure we're going to drown. But God says, I will never leave you or forsake you. How often, though, do we say, I can't find God? And God's saying, I'm right here. You just need to turn. I'm right here with you. By the way, Matt is our executive pastor. We have a pastoral staff of 3 pastors. Drake is the senior pastor. My role is lead pastor. And then Matt is our executive pastor. He's responsible for more of the business side of Elevating Life Church. However, that doesn't mean that he doesn't have direct impact on people's lives, as he was just telling you. It's amazing how God will bring people to the one that they need to hear from. Because there's people that I couldn't reach that Matt can. There's people that Matt can't reach that Drake can. There's people that Drake can't reach that our financial elder, Lynette, can reach. And so we work together as a team, not just us, but all of our team members. We're all in it together because we are what? Mo Betta together. Amen. Drake, you had a thought here on Proverbs 4:7?
No, I was going to actually give Lynette the stage.
Okay. I do want to bring in Lynette right now. And
that.
one of the things that we want to do is make sure that we celebrate things as well. Now, sometimes we have a lot to celebrate. Sometimes it's a little, but we have to be intentional for looking for those things. We have Lynette, who is many times the voice of reason for us. She brings in a different perspective as our financial elder. But one of the things that I want to start with here, Lynette, with you is a huge win that we have in a bookstore that started as a dream several years ago. And if you know Lynette, you know that this is a passion of hers. And she has put together a team of people and done a magnificent job. And I know I spend too much money in there, but I'll keep doing that. I just run up a big tab and I tell Lynette, I'll pay you here shortly, and then I pay it all off and I start again. So, but Lynette, I want you to give your thoughts a little bit on not only beginning the bookstore, but that passion behind it, why it's so important.
I think it's kind of the theme of everything we do here, but building that character of Christ. And I personally ask myself almost every day, what have I done today to build my character so that I'm more Christ-like. And I have a personal love of books. I love to read. So when Drake says, "Hey, do you think we could start a bookstore?" I'm going, "Sure, why not?" We started with one little shelf in there and probably, I don't know, 30 or 40 books maybe. And now we don't have enough room for all the books we have. So we have to pick and choose what we put out on a weekly basis. But it's an opportunity for all of us to learn and grow and build that character. As we make profits in the bookstore, we just reinvest back into more offerings for all of you, special orders, whatever. It's just a way to learn and grow. And each one of those books in there gives you that opportunity.
Can you give a little bit about next year, though, with the book and how we're going to connect that with the message?
Oh, good, yeah. Thank you. Yes, Drake has provided us through his planning for the coming year. We do have a book of the week. We started that this year and have tried to kind of focus on that out here in the foyer. But that's all laid out for next year. So we will have a book that correlates with each message each week. And if you want to delve deeper into that subject matter, the books will be available to you. So this year we weren't quite as prepared, so we didn't always have them available, but most of them we did. But I always got them later if not. So yeah, that's a way for you to take that subject and dig deeper into it.
One of the values that we live by here at Elevating Life Church is intentional growth. And that means putting our time and effort into growing, because we're called to do that, to become more Christ-like. And we don't just sit around and wait for God to pour it out on us. We go and seek it. Ask, seek, knock. And so we ask God to give us wisdom, and we seek it, and we knock on the door until he answers. And it's amazing how God will answer if you're persistent and consistent about it. And that's why the bookstore is such a huge benefit to us here. Plus, there's gifts. So, if you haven't gotten those Christmas gifts yet, it's a little late, but Lynette can help you. She's got some things in there. Drake, let's go back to that Proverbs verse, because I know you had some thoughts on that.
Real quick on the bookstore, just want to let everybody know there's a book of the year as well, if you read like I do.
One book a year.
Is that Wonderfully Weird Living? Yes. Okay. I do. Yeah. If you cue that up, but before we do, other questions. Anybody have other questions? Team.
Heather has one over there.
Heather has her hand up.
With being in mental health as a social worker, you had a workshop and a message titled "Why So Angry?" And your workshop, "Don't Worry, Be Happy." Can you elaborate on what the remedy would be for anger or anxiety?
Oh. Well, the first thing that comes to mind is one of the fruits of the Spirit. If we want to control, because we're to have self-control, we are to control our anger on one side, and on the other side, our anxiety and our worries. And when we truly develop the fruit of the Spirit known as patience, you have the ability to actually control your anger and those worries with the principles of life, what we can call the wisdom of God. So I believe what you're talking about, a couple of messages leaned into the aspect of how to think, because you said mental health. I promise you the cure to any mental health is the wisdom of God and getting it into our minds, into our thought process where we're thinking like Jesus. Agreed? 2 Corinthians 5:10. Please. That's one of our main focuses here, is to help people think like Jesus, but with one thing over here. This is called a godly attitude, or an attitude of love for life and for God, for human beings. Yes, look around. You are commanded, you're taught, you are to learn how to love everyone. Not in part, in whole, but once we start thinking properly, we develop patience with us and with each other. Now, that's what we're doing here at Elevating Life Church. We're just helping you to bring up a belief you have. So that's thought. How do I really believe? Should I love all people? Do I really believe that great commandment? I love love your neighbor as yourself. Here's the sad part: most don't. And so, rather than living by the tree of life and defining it the way God is, so that we can get that into our mental health, into our mental being, we decide what that is. No, I'm just going to love my family, or I'm just going to love who I like. Well, Eve took what she liked, and the fall happened. So we got to get back to the mental health of God and use that, so that then we have a way to, again, control the anger and the anxiety. Now, the definition of patience is this. You might want to write this down. Patience is nothing more than this. Patience is the acceptance or tolerance of delay, problems, and suffering without getting mad or anxious. And that's the fruit of the Spirit we're going after, Heather. And we know this, if we can teach not only that fruit of the Spirit in what the true definition is and what it is, and then integrate it into our life with those certain things we need to do, our mind, Romans 12:2, our mind is going to transform to the patterns of God's world, not this world. And so with that message in the workshop, don't worry, be happy, you have to intentionally go after that and learn it. Seek after God's truth. Most people don't do that. They interpret whatever it is with their feelings, with their attitudes. That's them. And rather than truly opening themselves up to, let's say, what reality is with God, the openness of that with responsibility through Christ, we stay in our cave and we keep that belief, and we're stiff-necked and hard-hearted. And so our mental health goes deeper and deeper into hell. And that's a very empty, nasty place to be. And that can happen to an individual, that can happen to a couple, that can happen to a family, that can happen to a church, that can happen to a community where we start living in our silos, in our caves. We live in a vacuum, if you will. And when that happens, we're not thinking like Jesus, and you're not coming to a place like this on a regular basis, so that we can challenge you in those beliefs, so you can put the truth in there, and you can live by those good truths intentionally, on purpose, and transform your mind. You're going to develop what is known as patience. Raise your hand if you believe you need a little bit more patience with those delays, with those problems, with those sufferings. Everybody's hands up. So
Can't get mine high enough.
Yeah, we're all in the same boat, and that's what is so awesome. But you got to determine, as a couple, as an individual, that you're going to live based on that target. Let's not miss the mark with this attitude. Because if you don't have the attitude or the target or the goal here, think about it. If with patience, if you don't have a target, you don't have an attitude, that happens. What is patience then? Except floating in space. It doesn't work. We need the attitude and the mind of Christ, and we need the plan of God and the target of God's very goodness in our life, so we become very good ourselves as Jesus did, and we can get through all those delays and sufferings. Well, you were talking about earlier, the rapids, and you've got to be patient with one another. And so, does that answer the question? And that will, I promise you, clear the mental health. But the problem is we think with our own biases. We are stiff-necked. I hear you, preacher. I'm even convicted about it, but nope. I'm not going to. And then we try to kind of give you a little bit of feedback, adjustments, and it's just humble yourself, receive the goodness, and let the beliefs, the truth, the qualified truth, transform your life.
One of the things, in the interest of time, we're going to pivot just a little bit here. One of the things that we do here at Elevating Life Church is continually challenge ourselves to make sure that we're walking in God's footsteps, not asking God to walk in our footsteps. And so as a pastoral staff, as an elder team, as a ministry team, we open ourselves up to challenge each other in that. And so then hopefully some of you see that we also challenge you, but we expect you to challenge us as well to make sure we're all doing this together and that we're moving in the right direction. And as we look forward to the new year, we have celebration, we have joys, we have all of these things that have been going on where we know that we're walking in God's footsteps and He blesses us through that. But as with your family, your work, your community, there's challenges as well. And so the question then becomes, how do we face those challenges? Do we go and hide in that cave and go, oh, God, blah? Or do we stand up and go, God, this is a whitewater rapid, but we know you got us. And so we're going to face it, and we're going to make our way through it the way you want us to. And I want to bring Matt and Lynette back in. They have a very tough task here at Elevating Life Church, and that is on the financial side. And as you know, it takes money to run a ministry. And God blesses that, but He also challenges us in that. And so, Matt and Lynette, I'm going to bring you guys in here. Matt, start with you and talk about that a little bit, about the financial side of making a ministry work.
The funnest part of church, talking about money. Why me?
I got to say, while Drake was talking a little bit ago, I quickly leaned over to Matt and said, I'm going to ask you to speak on the financial side of things. And if you could have seen the look he gave me at that point.
Well, it was because of the amount of time that I have left. I actually really enjoy talking about it. If people could just gain the perspective that God intends when it comes to money in church. We get it so mixed up that the church needs and that the church wants, and I got to pay my dues. It's really so misperspective. God provides this amazing structure when it comes to how to finance a church and His ministry, His world all in general, if the world could just get it right. We teach a 9-week class brought to you by the Ramsey folks that takes about 5 years to complete, right? So through that, it changes our behaviors and our perspectives of money. It gets us back into the perspective that we are managing God's resources, not our own, which once you go through that paradigm shift, it changes the perspective. It changes the, that little chip on our shoulder of, writing another check to church trying to get my money. A lot of people get up and walk out when we start talking about money because, a lot of churches don't get it right either because it's like, hey, you need to pay your way into heaven. However that perspective is. But the point is God provided us this amazing system for us. Has anybody in here felt really good about giving somebody something at one point? That's called generosity. That's generosity. It's different than obligation. It's different than responsibility, all these things that we tie to money. But when you get it right God's way with money, you can bestow blessings on people that bring you more joy than you ever did receiving any amount of money. The coolest thing you'll ever do with money is give it away once you get your head right, your heart right, your spirit right. When you learn to do it the way that God designed it to do it, the church doesn't have money problems. Actually, the world doesn't have money problems anymore because greed, the sense of that there's not going to be enough. Right? That's another thing is we think that we're going to run out of money. But it's a fluid thing. It's a movement thing. And usually what happens when we get stopped up, a closed fist, nothing passes through a closed fist, right? And that's an image that we use in our class is when we have an open hand, some money can get out. But guess what else can happen? Some can get in too. But the closed fist, nothing gets in, nothing gets out, gets stopped up, gets stale. It eats away at our soul, our spirit, our peace. And when you can get to that point where we can flow blessings through us instead of manage money, it changes everything. And that's the perspective that we strive to teach in our financial ministry and the way that we manage the church's money as well. Churches are just as guilty of it. There's churches out there that have multi-million-dollar trust funds in the back of them, and they're not doing anything. It's like, wait a second, you don't have anything holding you back but your own self. And we don't operate that way. When you look at the outreach that we do, that stuff costs a lot of money. And we do it every year without the money. We start off, Lynette thinks I'm crazy generally because she has the burden of making sure that everything balances. But we enter into these amazing outreach activities, nativity, egg drop, help me out, Falls Festival. All these things, we start off with no money and we pull it off. We feed many with few loaves of bread and few fish, and afterwards everybody's like, wow, how did you do that? People that run businesses and do industry out there like, wow, you guys must have an amazing budget. We have amazing faith in God that we provide it.
You got to share what they said. We had a meeting before the COVID-19. Remember that meeting?
Oh yeah.
You got to share that.
So we had a meeting with a regional church group.
Our partnership. Yeah.
And our partnership, they said, if you do not have a $250,000 plus budget, you will not make it through COVID. Because we're doomed.
Our budget is at 86,000. That's payroll and everything.
And so
here we are.
So then, when they looked at us and they said that, and we start joking, they're like, "What do you mean, guys?" And I'm like, "Well, our budget's half that." And they said, "What? We thought you guys were like $1.5 million budget, with all the stuff you guys do, all the things you do." And we're just like, "No." And so we operate on faith, right? I get that from the community a lot. Man, you guys are doing so much. And we're doing so much with little. And that's what God's instructed us to do. That's because of the amazing people that we have come here, the amazing volunteer base, and the donors and the people that believe in what we're doing. We do strive, though. We do strive to grow that. So if we have this much impact with such a small amount, imagine what we can do with more. We're not going to stop. We're going to keep going. If we've got to shrink back to meet what we can do and what we can do, we will, and we have. We've done more. But for us, for our congregation, when we get to that point where we can switch that paradigm and realize the gift that God gave us of generosity, there'll be more smiling faces, there'll be more joy, and there'll be less fights at home when it comes to money if we can switch that paradigm. And that's the whole focus of Financial Peace. That's the whole focus of the ministry that Lynette and I work on. It's not just counting the beans, it's making them grow as well.
Lynette, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
It's hard to add to what Matt already said, but
You add so well. What do you mean? For finance.
only if I have my calculator. I came out of corporate America, so I had that perspective around money. And coming in, I kept saying to Drake and to Matt, it's like, you got to help me get a different perspective here because I don't understand. I don't understand how we can start the month with zero and somehow we make it. We do it. We're able to pay the utility bills. We're able to keep the heat on. Most of the time we can pay our pastors their little bit that they get. And it does happen, and it is faith. It is believing. It is knowing that we are entrusted with God's money, not ours. And that peace that can bring to all of us is amazing.
Well, let me take just 2 minutes here to close this all out. As you know, we're closing this year out, and we're going into a new year. And I'm so excited because we're going to be introducing a new theme. In fact, the theme is spiritual goodness tastes good to the soul. And we're going to really, next year, look at the difference between being a religious person and a spiritual person, a spiritual life. Let me say this, religion all began when we lost relationship with God. And so next year, we're going to be understanding what that is. Are you a religious person or are you a spiritual person? Are you a Pharisee or are you truly a child of God that's connected with God through Jesus? where you are truly living out the way, the truth, and the life that truly gives a life an outcome that is beautiful, that is good, that is united, and more importantly, that is truthful. That's going to be the challenge for 2023. Are you a religious person or are you a spiritual person? And we'll be going through the entire year, message by message, in the sense of comparing that, where you have to listen to it and say, you know what? Do I believe this? Am I a religious person in my beliefs? Or am I completely in this, where we're going to change the world together? So that's next year's theme. Our team's working on, we're going to be putting a 50s diner. We want restaurant because we want God's word to feed your soul, just like practically or physically speaking. You eat every day. And we want to say it's so important that you meet not only your physical needs, but our priorities, our spiritual needs. And we're going to learn what that is.
Amen. I want to thank Lynette, Drake, Matt for coming up and sharing. I hope you see the passion. I hope you see the vision. And we want you to be a part of that with us in 2023 because we are Mo Better together. All right.
Amen.
Thank you guys. Appreciate it very much.